Good evening, friends. Welcome to Monk Chat here at Empty Cloud Buddhist Monastery. Very happy to be here with you this evening. I am Bhikkhu Santi, and I will be single-handing the Monk Chat session this evening. If you have not been with us yet this week, it may be worth reminding you or reminding everyone that that we are at the monastery on retreat now. It's our traditional winter retreat for 2 months. The community is in silence, and we're having plenty of beautiful time for intensive meditation. And during the retreat, the monks are taking turns taking care of our live stream Dhamma offerings week by week. So this will be my last offering of the week. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Please feel free to ask questions relating to Dhamma that have come up for you this week in relation to the talks that I've given, or simply in relation to your own life, your own experience, your own practice, anything that's on your mind related to the Dhamma, or questions about monastic life in general are welcome. We'll have plenty of time this evening for any questions that come up. You can feel free to type them into the live chat as they occur to you, now or on the fly. So good evening to, let's see, Gita, Denise, Cow's our friend, Mary, Jason, and Secret Spy Records, as well as a number of friends in the waiting room. Nice to have you all with us this morning. I see lots of people sending greetings. We have people with us from near and far. Nice to see our neighbor Mary. Hello, and hi to everyone. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to type them in. We have one question from our resident lay community, which maybe can start us all off with. It's quite a substantive question from our friend Jens, who maybe many of you remember from his extensive online days. I'll go ahead and summarize his question. It relates to a topic that came up in one of the Dhamma talks, or rather an example that I offered. We were talking about the practice of guarding the sense doors. This is a practice that represents a whole step in the Buddha's gradual training, one of the key formulations of the Noble Eightfold Path. The gradual training was a big topic for us this week, actually. It was presented in several of the suttas that we studied, and it came up in a couple of different contexts. The gradual training, for those of you who weren't here for any of that, is basically it's the samanas, the renunciants version of the Noble Eightfold Path, the renunciants version of Sila, Samadhi, Panya. It starts off with the renunciant hearing the teaching and being inspired to go forth. Starting off from faith on the path, the renunciant enters the path, enters the training with instruction on purifying conduct, body, speech, and mind. And once the disciple reaches a certain point, moves on to the stages of practicing contentment, practicing moderation in eating, moderation in sleeping. And the question concerns the next step, which is once the disciple is established in restraint, and once the disciple is established in conduct, the next step in the gradual training is called guarding the sense doors, restraining the senses. And in the talks that I gave this week, we spent quite a bit of time on it. My understanding of restraining the senses is that there's basically two levels about it that you can think about. The first level is basically in modern terms would translate it to a kind of a form of self-control, literally restraining the senses in the sense of choosing what you pay attention to through your conduct, through your choices. And I gave the example of a bakery. You're walking past the bakery and you smell delicious bread, but you've already had your breakfast and you know it's not really time for you to be thinking about food. So you restrain your senses, you guard the sense doors simply by you notice the smell and then you decide not to follow it. Maybe you decide, well, okay, I'm just not going to even look in that bakery window where I might see where that beautiful smell is coming from. Or the other example I gave was seeing a person who you are physically attracted to. If you're a disciple in the path, you're practicing celibacy, and it's kind of torment to be in close proximity to and paying close attention to somebody who you feel attracted to. So this first step of guarding the sense doors is, well, if that person is walking past, maybe you point your eyes downward. Spare yourself that challenging sense impression that stirs the passions that you're training yourself not to be overwhelmed by. So that's the first level of guarding the sense doors, the doors through which the sense impressions come. The second level is the practice of continual mindfulness, practicing mindfulness with every sense impression that arises, whether it comes in through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or whether it's a thought or idea or image, to know it with mindfulness and thereby prevent yourself from being carried away by it. So that's what the question is about. And here's Jens's question. If someone is stressed, sad, an emotional eater, for example, this is about the bakery example, they might have a harder time guarding the sense doors. When do we move from pure mindfulness to investigation? How do we avoid using mindfulness as a kind of spiritual bypass or to just avoid unwanted feelings? So let me make sure I'm not missing the key here. Yeah, when do you suggest investigating the feeling, grasping, craving cycle that arises, rather than closing the sense door? Okay, I think this question might be a little easier to answer than I thought. The idea is not to close the sense door, but to bring mindfulness to bear in the sense impression, whichever of those two stages you're at with guarding the sense doors. If it's looking away from the tempting item, it's not that attraction isn't going to be there. It's not that it's not going to arise. You still smelled the delicious bread. When you bring your eyes away, you're, I guess, in a sense, closing the sense door because you're cutting off the impression from developing directly, but it is still there in your mind. It's more like you're kind of turning down the volume. You're reducing its impact. The point isn't to erase it or to not feel it. It's too late. It's already impinged upon your senses. The point is to turn the volume down and to not be overwhelmed by it, to not be lost in it or carried away by it. So if someone is, for example, stressed and sad and is an emotional eater, and they know that there's I also use the example of a box of chocolate chip cookies in the kitchen, it might be helpful to that person to, I'll repeat my example from earlier in the week, to put that box of cookies on the top shelf way in the back so that they won't unconsciously find themselves having the box in their hand at the cabinet. They'll have to go through some steps to make sure that they become mindful of what they're doing before they get to the box of cookies that they actually don't want to dive into. I think that in that sense, the first stage of training the senses, of not following the sense impression, maybe of diverting your eyes, is actually simply setting your. I like the it's kind of a pop psychology motto: setting yourself up for success. It's not a denial of your experience. It's not an erasure of experience. It's more putting yourself in a position not to be overwhelmed by your experience. Does that answer the question? Any follow-up?
Not right now. I have to think.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have had some questions come in. Kauser Friend asks, I have a question about the third section of the Satipatthana Sutta. It is pretty short and mostly consists of a list of pairs of states of mind. Could you perhaps elaborate on their meaning? Specifically, the meanings of the pairs constricted, scattered, expansive, unexpansive, supreme, not supreme, and freed, unfreed. Well, this is a really deep question, a wonderful topic for us. I'll be delighted to reflect on this a little bit. So the third of the four satipatthanas, the first is mindfulness of the body. The second is mindfulness of feeling, Vedana, one of our topics this week. And the third is mindfulness of what's usually translated mind states, the chitta. But well, maybe we can even reflect a little on the broader sense of what mind states really refers to. I'll start with the pairs that you asked about. I'm not going to be able to perfectly quote the lines, but basically the instructions are that the disciple who's practicing knows each mind state that arises, or practices knowing mind states that arise for what they are as mind states. Knows he or she knows a scattered mind is a scattered mind, a constricted mind is a constricted mind, or an expanded mind is an expanded mind. Contracted mind is a contracted mind, or an expansive mind is an expansive mind. And from there we go away from opposites to a supreme mind as a supreme mind. I think Bhikkhu Bodhi says exalted, and a liberated mind as a liberated mind. So there's a lot of beauty and power just in these pairs and the words, but they do refer to, at least the first couple refer to states that I think we're all pretty familiar with. Let's start with contracted and expanded. I actually felt like I made a kind of step forward when I penetrated the meaning of this pair for myself. Of course, my own understanding is like yours, several thousand years after the fact of how the words were originally understood. So there's some uncertainty about it. But when I came to my own sense of what I thought it meant, that was helpful for me. Anyway, I'll share that with a caveat that I may not be using the words exactly the way people did in the time of the Buddha, but maybe it'll be helpful for you. So a contracted mind to me is the mind, the feeling of the mind in a state where you're lost in the mind. A couple of examples of a contracted mind might be an angry mind, a fearful mind, a jealous mind, a bored, well, maybe not bored. Yeah, bored is contracted. It's a mind in which whatever the thoughts are, have you inside of them. You're not in the present. You're not aware of the actual reality that you're inhabiting at the moment, at that time. You may be a little bit aware of it. The terms define a pole. You're somewhere in the spectrum between maybe you are just like in a frenzy of some sort where you're just not aware of your body at all, but there may be some slight awareness of it. But all of those states to me would count as contracted minds, minds where you're in a spin, you've lost it. You're in meditation and you think of a particular person. Maybe it's a relative, a brother or a sister who said something that bothered you, and it's been on your mind and you forgot about it, and then it comes back and you kind of forget about your breath and you start reflecting on it, and then the feeling of like the bad feeling that it gave you starts to bring up other thoughts. And before you know it, you've completely forgotten that you're meditating. That would be a contracted mind. So that suggested to me that, oh, okay, I think I get how my usual labels for my mental states, which are basically moods, I see how that matches this notion of contracted. An expanded mind, well, that must be the opposite, right? That's the mind of presence. I think it took me a while to figure this out because it can feel at first like, especially when you're still getting bored with the kind of, when boredom is coming in as you keep bringing yourself back to the present, you might be used to something much more stimulating, much more pleasant / unpleasant than the calm of being present. And it can feel like, well, how's that expanded? If you work with that sense, look for the expansiveness in presence when your mind is not contracted, when you have those moments of being able to stay with it, knowing the breath. Ajahn Brahm uses the phrase, the beautiful breath, which to me suggests knowing the details of the breath, seeing the beauties of the simple natural structures of its pace, its timing, its contours. A whole world opens up, and it's quite an expansive one. And this applies to any present moment meditation. It can be formal meditation where you're sitting with your eyes closed. It can be any of the sensations in the body. It can be the light in your eyes. It can be the faint ringing in your ears that becomes a connection to your inner world. Or it can be the meditation of walking around outside and seeing the light through the leaves on its own terms, seeing the infinite depth and beauty of nature, maybe even just like in a pebble sitting by the side of the road. So that's what's meant by an expanded mind. The other pairs are, well, the next pair is a little bit more straightforward. A distracted mind versus a concentrated mind. We talk quite a bit about that, so I'm not going to delve into it, except to note that a distracted, scattered mind is the opposite of a mind in samadhi. The definition that's come down to us through the ages that has really stuck is that the essence of samadhi, the state that we're cultivating in samatha meditation, is a state of non-distraction of the mind, not jumping from thing to thing. The last two states, the exalted mind and the liberated mind, there's actually a bit of, there are varying interpretations. The exalted mind in the commentaries is related to, I believe, the Brahma Viharas, the Buddha's spectrum of love, as one scholar I admire defines them. Metta, friendliness, loving kindness, upekkha, equanimity, mudita, empathetic joy, karuna, compassion. Those dimensions and aspects of selfless love elevate the mind, and that adjective mahagata, which I think is usually translated exalted. How did you? I think you said supreme. Is referring to that. And I think that's a good translation. Liberated mind, there's a little bit of controversy about that because at least the commentary, Buddhaghosa does not want to connect that with nibbana because it is a temporary state when you're in meditation. I think the English is the English word freed, a freed mind, is one that we all have a sense of. Like when the mind is free, even if it's just for a moment, I think that's something that you probably can have some sense of just from the English word. I won't take a stand on, for example, Ajahn Buddhadasa, one of the greatest Thai masters who offered us the idea of a kind of temporary nibbana, moment to moment, momentary nibbana, that we have these moments of beautiful freedom in the course of our delusion, which we can learn a lot from. And certainly in meditation, cultivating peace the way that we do, we have more of those moments, and we have more opportunity to be with them. So maybe I'll just leave the meaning of a liberated mind in the Chittanupasi, the third of the foundations, open. So there's some reflections. If you have any follow-up questions, you're welcome to ask. How's our friend? And some other questions have come in. Let's continue. Secret Spy Records had some comments that I'm not able to connect directly to. I'm sure they're a response to something that I was saying, not bypassing. Sorry, please feel free to clarify if that's a comment you wanted to share. Jason says, a lot of books on habit changing agree with these ideas, what I was talking about earlier. And he offers a couple of titles: Atomic Habits, Willpower Doesn't Work. I'm not familiar with either of those. Well, willpower, I'm not sure I agree with the premise that I can at least guess at behind the title, Willpower Doesn't Work. Willpower is part of it, but there's working hard versus working smart. We set an intention. Willpower just means the power of intention, the power of applying your will to an intention. But absolutely, doing it skillfully is what makes the difference. Yeah, I'll come back to my chocolate chip cookie box. Like if you're on a diet, don't put out a plate of chocolate chip cookies on the counter, because then you're relying on just pure willpower without any support. If you know yourself, know your own habits and your own limits. And for me, yeah, I would keep the cookies in the box and put them in the top shelf in the back and make a clear decision before I find them in my hand on the way to my mouth. Okay, Mark says, so a friend was recently complaining to their Zen teacher about people who were treating them poorly. The teacher replied that these were bodhisattvas. Is this viewpoint in line with your teachings? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Everything is teaching us. It's the title of Ajahn Chah's, one of his more beloved books. Everything is teaching us. People who are giving you a hard time, those are your teachers. If you can catch it, if you're not overwhelmed by it, or if you are later, you can reflect on it and learn. And if you can find gratitude for those people, that's a really powerful practice. Scott says, Bhante, thank you for your reflections. I would be most appreciative if you could speak about a Buddhist perspective on the fight, which is it, fight and flight or flight and fight? You give us all three response. These are overwhelmed states. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a Buddhist perspective that you just offered. When you're triggered by the fight or flight response, something happens that absolutely galvanizes you to action. Either a surge of aggression comes up, or a fearful reflex to get away comes up. That's a big challenge. That's the well, I mean, it's not a person, but it's a kind of bodhisattva in itself, or a moment at least when you can you stand to learn a great deal. What comes to mind is noticing back in lay life, I became a monk quite a bit later in life. I have a daughter, wonderful woman now, full grown. But as a child, I noticed that sometimes she would panic, and I remembered my own panicking, and I remembered the course of learning to not panic in physical situations. I had the advantage of being able to learn that because I was involved in well, like many of us, I would get into dangerous situations sometimes when I was a kid, and over the course of a number of such experiences, I learned to recognize the onset of panic, and I developed the sense that I had to kind of separate myself from the self that was panicking. And in retrospect, I learned that that was kind of a learnable skill and a very valuable skill. And I was very happy to see that my daughter was able to learn it herself over the course of time. And watching that process, I especially reflecting on it after coming to the Dhamma and beginning my own practice, I recognize that actually Buddhism gives us a really good explanation of that process of learning to see your own mind as it starts to panic. It is basically the process or the ability, the capacity that let me learn that, or that let her learn it, is mindfulness, the ability to see in context what's happening. But also, I think it's kind of the perspective of not self is relevant. It's a kind of a demonstration of not self, insofar as there's that part of me that sees the panic coming, and then there's the part of me that's tipping into the panic. So, which one am I? There's an opportunity there to discern that there isn't actually a unitary me in there. There's a kind of collective that's negotiating experiences that are coming up. I don't know if that would be like the Buddhist perspective on it, but that is a Buddhist perspective on it. I'm willing to identify in that way. Jason asks, could all the Buddha's teachings be taught in plain English? I believe so, and not only do I think so, but the Buddha said so. He said, do not insist on, to his monks, in encouraging his monks to share the Dhamma, to go forth and spread the Dhamma. No two should go by the same path. He encouraged his monks to go out and wander and share the Dhamma. And along the way, he, in several different places in the Pali Canon, said, do not insist on, actually the phrase is a little bit ambiguous. In the literal translation of what he said was, do not insist on own language. And when you read the passages where he says this in context, the meaning is clearly, do not insist on using your own language to explain to other people. Use their language if that's going to help. There are orthodox interpretations that try to say that own language, the phrase that to me really clearly means like, don't insist on your own language, use the language of whoever you're talking to. This orthodox tradition tries to argue that this means use the Pali language, basically use my own language. And this has been, I think, a mixed blessing. It's a tremendous blessing that we have Pali as a very central part of Theravada tradition, because it preserves for us incredible depth of nuance for an incredible resource for understanding the origins of the Dhamma. But at the same time, we don't want to blur the first meaning of that injunction, which is that, yeah, we want to break it down into our own terms. This was actually, I didn't think of it, but there's a direct kind of textual support there for the principle I was pointing to last night, for those of you who were here, of making the translation of Dhamma concepts that seem mysterious or opaque or mystifying or that are just mystifying you. Try to make the translation to terms that you use, that you understand, both the actual words and the concepts. There are a few thoughts on that. I could say a lot more. It's actually a topic I'm quite interested in. Maybe one final comment on that issue is I think it's notable that when we look at the translations that we get of the Pali Suttas and we read the Buddha's teachings, we often will come across multiple words for the same idea. The Buddha encourages us to work towards not just freedom, but liberation, freedom, relinquishment, peace, stillness. He gives us multiple terms for the same quality. And that's just one example. The idea is to give us many ways of finding our way towards a concept or a truth. And this also supports the idea that, yeah, you can explain it all in your own language. Okay, any other questions? Yes. Thomas Gabriel says, Dear Bhante, thank you for the Dhamma talk. You're very welcome. I find it difficult to connect with people due to not having many other interests than Buddhism and meditation practice. Do you have any advice for me? I'll share my first two responses that come to mind. I have two bits of advice. The first is cultivate Dhamma friends. There are sitting groups, there are online groups like this. There are talks, there are visitors. I don't know where you live, Thomas Gabriel, but going to Dhamma events, striking up conversations, making Dhamma friends is an incredibly wonderful support. It'll enrich your life tremendously. And then you can talk about what's really alive inside of you. So that being said, it also occurs to me that, well, you have a life and you have many other people in that life, and many of those people are probably important to you. And you want to be able to connect with people who are not sharing your current interests. And that's really important too. So I would consider really cultivating your powers of listening and taking an interest in other people's interests. Of course, you're going to be relating their concerns and their interests to what you know, and it can be a real. They can be. I'll refer to an earlier question. They can be bodhisattvas for you if you find yourself slipping into judgment, like feeling like a friend's interests now that you used to share, they now seem superficial to you. Well, look at it from that person's point of view, and offer them your. You don't have to share their indulgences, but in fact, it would be unskillful to do that. But you can appreciate their situation and offer them your heart, your support, your caring for their well-being, and it's not a question of taking on their interests or agreeing with their values so much as connecting with them. That's all pretty general, but that's kind of what comes to me now. If you have any more specific kind of follow-up questions, I'd be happy to take them on. All right, Secret Spy Records is feeling like my response was okay, in agreement with what you were thinking. Tom Collingwood writes, how would someone cope with a feeling of hopelessness around the idea that I will not progress towards enlightenment as a layperson? Oh, that is an excellent question, and probably a really common one. I think lay practitioners can often feel like, what are the chances for me? Lay life can be really challenging for Dhamma practitioners. I remember just countless days of going through my 8-hour workday and then just like not having anything left in the tank and wanting to practice and just not having any energy for it. So even just at that simple level, lay life can be really challenging. And the feeling of hopelessness itself, which is what you're asking about, is itself a hindrance. It can be a huge hindrance. what I would encourage you to remember is that the capacity for enlightenment, for the end of the path, for realizing the highest peace, the highest realization, is one that is already present in you. It's not a thing that you're going to get by attaining. It's not a thing that you get through exerting your energy necessarily. It's something that is in you. Being able to devote yourself to it full time gives you much greater scope for exploring the possibilities. But that's no guarantee either. There are many instances of people having profound insights through that come in very challenging circumstances. Can a person become an arahant as a layperson? Well, tradition is actually a little divided on that, and some traditions say yes, absolutely. My advice for working with the sense of hopelessness is, okay, I'm committed to the path. I understand that the fundamental heart of the path is to know each state. That I'm committed to nibbana, and that necessarily means that I'm committed to the belief or the idea, the understanding that nibbana is available in every moment of experience, whether it is an optimistic moment or a pessimistic moment. The possibility for nibbana is there. So look into your hopelessness, inquire into your hopelessness. If you're feeling like I'm too hopeless to sit down and meditate, well, look at that, because you're missing a great chance to meditate. As long as you can see it, as long as you can have enough presence of mind to recognize that I am in a terrible mood. Okay, sit down and meditate. Not with the goal of getting rid of it, but with the goal of investigating that mood, of knowing that mood. Just simply being with the mood, allowing it. Can being with that mood be good enough? Can being with that bad mood be good enough? Because if there is nibbana, nibbana is present and available in every moment. That's what it is. It's unconditioned. It's not conditional. If it was conditioned, then yeah, sometimes it would be there, sometimes it wouldn't, sometimes it could be there, sometimes it couldn't. But the idea is that there's no conditions on it. It's not something that you get at a good time when you're in a good mood. It's something that can be realized at any time in any mood. And it's not that you're looking for it. You're looking rather at your suffering. And hopelessness is suffering. It's heavy dukkha. So I hope those words are encouraging. I've had the experience of moods just weirdly letting go. You can be in a terrible mood and something shifts and suddenly it's gone. Well, there's an opportunity for insight. Not only is the mood gone, but wow, that things really are impermanent. This thing that felt like it was impossible, like it was going to go on forever, doesn't feel that way. Where did that feeling go? What was that feeling? It literally was a wisp of nothing. Okay, we've got a bunch of other questions that have come in. I hope that's helpful. Let's see which one was next here. What a beautiful thing that Scott said. I will be your friend, Thomas, to that person who was interested in forming, or who I was encouraging to form some Dhamma friendships. I hope you'll take Scott up on that. Jason says, thank you. I have slowly built up common Pali vocabulary words, but anytime I use them to communicate, I feel like I'm hiding behind mysterious concepts. I appreciate what you said so far. You're welcome. Yeah, the talk that I gave last night included 15 or 20 minutes of reflection on this idea of, maybe 10 or 15 minutes of reflection, maybe 2 hours of reflection. I'm not sure how it felt on this idea of making the translation. There's a lot to be gained in playing around with contemporary concepts. There are concepts in our modern vocabulary that simply were not available in the time of the Buddha. concepts like the unconscious. That particular concept was fleshed out in really new ways in the 19th and 20th century that I found helpful for thinking about the Dhamma. Our modern concept of the imagination, there's a lot to explore in there when you're thinking about Dhamma concepts. How does that relate? Or our contemporary ideas of intelligence. This was my example last night. How does the way that we think about intelligence in modern terms relate to the way the thought world of the Pali Canon lays out the understanding of wisdom for us, for example, or ignorance? So I hope reflecting on that will be helpful for you. Mark writes, so everything I've read on the internet says that bodhisattvas are those who have taken the vows to become a Buddha. It seems to contradict people who are out to cause us trouble. Yeah, I was, and I think the question, I don't remember the name of the person who asked the question, I'm sorry. But this would be a more figurative or poetic use of the word. What you're pointing to is the literal use of the word. So yeah, you're right. But getting used to also understanding how words can be used suggestively. The idea isn't that somebody who's causing you a hard time is literally a bodhisattva. It's that for you, from your perspective, you can look at them as a teacher. They're not trying to teach you anything. They're trying to oppress you or poke you or give you a hard time. But you don't have to accept that. There's a wonderful teaching from S.N. Goenka, the leader of the as they call it, the Vipassana movement, although many are not reluctant to completely let go of that word, having other meanings as well. But he said, if somebody comes to you with a gift of anger, for example, you don't have to accept that gift. So, of course, we don't usually think of anger as a gift, but with that beautiful teaching, Goenka is showing us how we can see it. We can see something that might be intended as the opposite of a gift as a gift. And this is the same idea. I hope that's helpful. So not literal bodhisattvas, but poetically speaking, figuratively speaking. Mark says, I can see that it's okay to say they're teaching us something about the nature of our mind, but not really to call them bodhisattvas. Any comments here? Well, we have to be sensitive to people's feelings about words, especially referring to the sacred. But we also have to be tolerant that people, will use words in different ways. And personally, I'm kind of I sometimes call myself a big tent Buddhist. I like to, I think it's helpful to try to include as many people as possible in our conversations about Dhamma. So being more playful with language or free, imaginative, I think can be positive. Of course, being sensitive to, not offending people. So and actually it's a regular practice for monks and it's a great practice for anyone to regularly check in and regularly ask forgiveness, if you inadvertently give offense. So this is my first check-in for the evening. Like if I'm giving any offense in how I'm using any Buddhist terms, I ask your forgiveness. The intention is to include and to connect. And Kumu says, I am also trying to listen a lot more. This is referring to a previous question. I'm trying to listen a lot more now to others than just talk. It's a very positive and an interesting experience, learning a lot more about others and myself. Yeah, that's great. Making a practice of not talking as much as you usually do if you're a person who talks a lot can be really valuable. I have, throughout my life, been a talker. As a monk, I've had to, not had to, but I've taken on the practice of restraining that more than I ever have in my life. It's kind of part of monastic comportment to restrain speech, to not try to be a special person by always saying the clever thing that comes to mind. And it's hard if you're like somebody who really identifies with the clever things that you say. But it's incredibly valuable. You score fewer points as it were, by listening more and talking less. But what you're pointing to, Kumu, I think is a wonderful kind of compensation for that, which is that people open up to you. People love a good listener, and you can learn so much. So yeah, I really encourage that. Bearing in mind, the opposite is also true. If you're a person who always keeps quiet, there's a real value in learning to express yourself. We're trying to find the middle way. Tom says, thank you, Bhante. Really valuable advice. I will try my best as a lay practitioner to keep these points in mind. The idea is not necessarily an attainment, but with us waiting is encouraging. Yeah, that's it exactly. Great. And Thomas Gabriel says, that was very useful. Thank you. I live in Greenland. Wow. And there are not many Buddhists here. I will try being more of a mindful listener when engaging with other lay people and colleagues. Great. Yeah, thank you. Wonderful. May there come to be plenty of Dhamma practitioners in Greenland. I hope you can find some there, and that you can connect with people who are not explicitly practitioners, but may be interested in some of the same themes. And Thomas continues, thank you, Scott. I appreciate that. Yes, great. Yeah, online friends are friends. I've become a great appreciator through these programs that Empty Cloud offers. I'm a visiting monk here. I'm a visitor to the monastery, and hadn't really been involved at all in sharing Dhamma online. And yeah, I think it's really valuable. There are no shortage of people interested in the Dhamma and Buddhism online. Thomas Gabriel. And Kowsar Friend says, I have a hard time relating Buddhism to people who don't really know much about it. Any tips on talking about Buddhism without going too deep? The only thing that comes to mind is this sort of classic advice I think I first heard, and I've heard countless times by people quoting the same book. It was in one of the books by one of the founding IMS teachers, Jack Cornfield, I think, possibly one of the other teachers in that movement who are prolific writers, telling the story of someone who had become really excited about the Dhamma and had gotten into it and had gone and lived at one of their centers and went home to visit her family and just found herself really clashing with her family because she wanted to talk about the Dhamma, and they were just really resistant and upset about it. And over the course of her visit, she changed strategy, and she decided that rather than trying to talk about the Dhamma with them, she would just simply try to practice and try to regain the momentum that she had before she went home for her family visit, and spun out with all of her family stuff coming up. So she started practicing more and became more peaceful, and started getting along great with her family. And the sort of punchline to the story was that when she came back and talked to her teachers about it, they kind of boiled the advice down to don't try to teach about the Buddha, be a Buddha, and that's going to be really helpful to you. So in that sense, like rather than worrying about explaining all the nuances of doctrine, stick to the basics and be an example through your practice. That my advice might have been a little bit off target, but you can't go wrong with speaking from a centered place, which you cultivate through practice. Share the ideas of the Dhamma as you understand them yourself and as you think might be helpful. Just keep your intention clear that you're not trying to impress anybody. You're not trying to show your mastery of doctrine. Just share what you think might be helpful for that person. Maybe that's, you can forget about the first story. It might not be relevant. Okay, Miguel Hidalgo Alarcon says, coronavirus pandemic is a teacher for us all now. No kidding. Yeah, that is indeed so. Plenty to learn there. Yeah. Actually, that's one beautiful thing I've noticed in talking to friends. This is a recurring theme tonight. Friends who are not involved in the Dhamma, is just how many people are actually appreciating the corona pandemic as a teacher. I've had a number of different people in my life who are not involved in the Dhamma take note of the positive aspects of how quiet everything is, of all the time that they've had to spend alone. There are many people who are discovering a new side of experience, a new potential in their experience that might not otherwise have had that chance. And then there's some harder teachings that we're getting as well. So let me move on to the next question. Denise says, any chance the monastery will partially open to the public after winter retreat? Other houses of worship are opened at reduced capacity in the tri-state area. So we are in silence at this point. So I'm not really sure what the current plans of the abbots are, but I'm very sure that they are very carefully monitoring, the current state of danger, and will make a wise judgment. It's absolutely a very high priority to have the monastery as open to people as possible to share the Dhamma. That's that's a huge part of what we're here for. So to the extent that the abbots kind of feel like it can be done safely, we're gonna do it. I just don't know what the current thinking is, and that's a long time from now. It's still 5 weeks out. So things could shift before then. We really don't know how things are going to be. So please stay tuned, Denise. I hope things will go such that we can reopen in some capacity. Gonzalo Pardo says, dear teacher, I really liked your teaching on manasikara and intention and all your teachings of the week. Thank you very much. It's kind of you to say. Hope there will be a chance to chat again with you. Thank you very much. I hope so too. Kumu says, Bhante, could you please explain a Pacceka Buddha? Is there a sutta where the Buddha explains about this state of attainment? There's a sutta where the Buddha reflects on and appreciates the Pacceka Buddhas, but I'm not sure that he explains what the state is. I can share my understanding of it. My understanding is a kind of a tangle of what's in the suttas and what is the traditional understanding from the commentaries, and I'm not sure that I can untangle it because I'm not exactly sure what I learned where. But I'll share a couple of ideas. A Pacceka Buddha, and I think that I'm saying it with an N in there, Pacceka, which is how the word I think is pronounced from the Pali. But then I think the later form, I don't know if it's Sanskrit, is Pacceka. I'm not actually sure, but yeah, you hear it both ways. Is a solitary Buddha. It is a person who attains realization on their own, typically a hermit, someone who finds their way to the end of the path through their own efforts. That's the short definition. Pacceka Buddhas are said, and I think this is from the tradition, not from the suttas, but I think that it's said that a Pacceka Buddha can only arise when there is no dispensation in the world. There is no living teaching. They can't arise when a Buddha is there. If there's a Buddha, there's not going to be a Pacceka Buddha. And they can't arise when the teaching is there. I think, and I wonder, a part of me, maybe a slightly more cynical part of me, wants to think, and I would have to double check, that this is a commentarial edition that might kind of be protecting the turf a little bit of who can become a Buddha. Like, I really wonder. I wonder if that's in the suttas, that you can't have Pacceka Buddhas. I take the image of the Pacceka Buddha as an encouragement to, maybe a reinforcement of the Buddha's very clear teaching that The path is one we have to walk for ourselves. The Buddha can show us the path, but to get to the end of the path, we have to walk it. We have to find our way ourselves. And Pachenka Buddhas are images of people who have managed to do that without even having the Buddha show them the path. That sutta that I mentioned is in the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha talks, goes through a list of all the different Pachenka Buddhas and basically just like offers verses about how magnificent they were. And I don't know the number. You can look it up in the index of the Majjhima Nikaya, and you'll find that sutta on Pachenka Buddhas. The whole sutta is devoted to them. Elliot asks, sorry to interrupt the monk chat. You're not interrupting. That's what we're here for. I met you, Santi, in front of my house in West Orange. Oh, Elliot, yes. And I seek refuge with your Sangha. Wonderful, welcome. And sent an email requesting it. I hope to hear back and meet with a monk as soon as possible. I'm sure that your message has been received. The abbots are definitely monitoring the email. I don't know how often. Oh no, the retreat manager is telling me that that's not the case. Will there be periodic email checks or?
There should be an auto response that says they're not looking at their email and to email winter@emptycloud.org.
Okay, serves me right for using the word "sure" in a doctrine, in a teaching that that holds up unsure as one of the characteristic marks of all existence. So not sure that they're checking email, and indeed, I now find out they are not checking email. So Elliot, if you got the auto response, I don't know if you could hear anything that our retreat manager Antoinette just shared, but when you sent that email, you should have gotten an auto response saying that no, sorry, we're not checking email until the end of the retreat. Our abbots are also having a retreat, which is great. But you can email the house manager if you want more insight into the schedule or anything like that. I bet the email was in that auto response. But I guess we'll just have to ask you to be patient, Elliot. Unfortunately, the monastery is closed to visitors at this point. As soon as we can open up, we're going to be welcoming visitors, and you'll be very welcome here to be part of our lay community. Nice to hear from you, by the way. That was a really nice day. I was with two of the other monks when we were walking through West Orange on our alms round, and you came out to meet us and make a beautiful offering. It's very appreciated. Jason says, do you know any monks who have type 1 diabetes requiring insulin? I do not, but I see one head nodding in the room. So yeah, we know of one. I don't know what the background of your question is, Jason. Feel free to ask a follow-up if there's something specific you're wondering about that. Kaiser Friend says, thank you for your advice. My question was prompted specifically because I was asked, why are you a Buddhist? Why be religious at all? By an atheist relative. I couldn't find the words to explain. And there's a follow-up comment. Relating appropriate teachings on wholesomeness in the moment is much easier and doesn't have to be overtly, I'm not sure what you're responding to. Oh yeah, is much easier and doesn't have to be overtly Buddhist or religious. It's just good advice. But answering, why are you Buddhist, is hard. The question that you were asked is pretty pointed. It's not really why are you Buddhist? It's like, why are you Buddhist? Why be religious at all? It's a very pointed question. I don't know. I don't know if it's really appropriate for me to offer advice because I don't know the actual situation or the tone or the context. But it's worth considering in those moments, the strategy, which I think is kind of one that's really consonant with the teaching, of turning the question itself into the thing to inquire about. Like, why is it important to you whether or not others hold a certain belief? Why is it important, if you're an atheist, that I explain why I am or not? Not to ask it in a pointed way, but to really inquire into that. One of the really important themes in the Dhamma that we talked about a great deal this week was the emphasis that the Buddha places on attachment to views, and the wisdom of not clinging to belief one way or the other, but to understanding the mechanism of how we identify with our beliefs. We make ourselves into selves who believe X or believe Y, or don't believe X or don't believe Y, and make that into a kind of pillar of our identity in a way that, that can lead to, sharp questions, and maybe from sharp questions, angry words, and as it's put in the sutta, verbal daggers. It's nice it can be valuable to short circuit that process by looking at the motive, the intention. Again, not in a pointed way, but really in an inquiring way. Like, why is this important to us even? What one another believes about the nature of the entire universe, the nature of existence. It's the essence of what in the suttas is called a speculative view. You don't get a much more speculative view than, does God exist? Does God not exist? So yeah, you can turn the question back on the person asking, and see if you can explore that together. Scott goes on, cows are friend. I thought about this question a lot. I answer it with, there's my same answer. I answer it with a question. You might have a different question than I just had, though. Scott says, is Buddhism useful? Is it beneficial? The answer for me is a big yes. So that's why I continue with the practice. Hey, that's a good answer too. There's another idea for you, cows are friend. Kumu says, I too got an auto reply when I subscribed to the email list. It said that the monks are on their winter retreat. Okay, so the email list is going out. I hope you can find it in your inbox, Elliot. And ask for your patience. We're not going anywhere. We'll be here welcoming our friends from the community as soon as we can in terms of opening up. And Putrika Munasinghe, if I'm pronouncing your name right, says, thank you. Jason says, I have type 1, this is following up on the question. I have type 1 diabetes myself, and I'd love to meet any monks who have it as well. I've been told I couldn't be a monk with it. I wondered if this was what your question was getting at. There is a general rule in the ordination proceedings, in the ordinances, the guidelines that are laid down in the Bhikkhu's Rules of Discipline as for who is eligible to become a monk, which say that there are certain obstructing illnesses which preclude someone becoming a monk because of the challenges it would pose for the Sangha. Diabetes, of course, is a serious illness. I don't know if every Sangha would agree that it would preclude you from becoming a monk. I wouldn't assume that that's the case. If it's something that you're really interested and serious about, you can visit monasteries. You can speak with abbots at a number of different monasteries and really make sure. I'm not sure. I might be wrong about that. It is a very serious illness. I understand that requires daily attention and regular access to medical care. And you can't always count on that as a monk. But it's worth looking into a little bit further. The diseases which are listed in the actual ordination ceremony are, well, actually, leprosy is one of them, and that's now something that's easily controlled. So it's really, it would only preclude someone from being a monk out of tradition, which would be a shame. But there's also the sort of broader interpretation, if we have to think about that the communities do have to think about their overall long-term abilities to support each other. So please look into it, and I hope you can get to the bottom of it, and that that your own aspirations can find their fullest expression, whether you can become a monk or not. Okay, I think I don't see any other questions. I hope I didn't miss any. Any questions from our resident community? You're also welcome to ask questions. And if anyone in our online community with us in the live chat has anything else they'd like to ask, we do have a little bit more time. And if not, we can end early. All right, one more question has come in while the residents are thinking. Adriana says, hey, Bhante, just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to do this tonight. I've been listening to the questions and answers tonight, and they've all been helpful. You're very welcome. Glad to hear it. Okay, we have a question from the resident community. What would you like to ask?
Will you please share your thoughts on the distinction between knowledge and wisdom?
The question is, can I share my thoughts on the distinction between knowledge and wisdom? I want to ask for a little bit of clarification, because I'm not sure if you mean knowledge and wisdom as those words are used like in translating the suttas, or the way that we use them in English. Okay, so in the suttas, we often come across the formulation as kind of a pair, like wisdom and knowledge. My understanding is that because there was not the same sort of psychological understanding of mind that we have now, mental factors were viewed more easily as not self, in a sense. They were viewed as kind of actors in their own right. And wisdom, and this can be a really valuable way to look at them, actually, because when you bring your awareness to bear on wisdom as it's alive in the mind, at least, yeah, that's my sense. My sense is that there's a lot of truth to that perspective. But along with that idea of wisdom being like a kind of independent actor, I think that there's some real mysticism that creeps in with the idea of revelation, that the products of wisdom, what wisdom produces, has a kind of supernatural reach, and knowledge to me can have that flavor in a way that I found kind of confusing at first, until I related it to the idea of penetrating imagination, of the way that we can have, for example, dreams that reveal to us incredibly deep truths that we simply did not know until we dwelled in them. I think that would be an example of what's pointed at by knowledge. Just this morning, we looked at a sutta where one of the other leading renunciants of the Buddha's time, the founder of the Jain religion, was presented by his followers as having knowledge and vision constantly before him. Sorry, knowledge and vision are the pair that are usually given, not wisdom and knowledge. Wisdom is the faculty whereby knowledge and vision arise. So I think it's the word vision that kind of gives me that slightly supernatural flavor to it, of like a revelation or prophecy. And that works just fine if that makes sense to you. But in my understanding, it's more the crystallization of a penetrating intelligence. It's what you see when you bring the mind to a level of refinement where insight appears. It's the form that insight takes when it appears. Pardon? Knowledge, yeah. And wisdom, I think we're here for one of the talks where I talked about my understanding it, but I did dwell on it I did dwell on it a bit in each of the talks. My understanding of wisdom as our skillful creative intelligence. That's kind of how I make the translation. From the perspective of not self, what I notice in my meditation is that I can't actually see the operation of intelligence. It doesn't actually appear on stage in the mind. I see the results, I see the products, but the actual creative act, how that happens is an incredibly deep and profound and beautiful mystery to me. Mindfulness, and this is something that Mahabua says explicitly, like when you really look, mindfulness is all alone. It's all alone in the mind. And the underlying operations are all off stage. You can't see them. They don't appear directly. So a few more questions have come in. Did that answer the question? Did you follow up? Sure.
So I heard part of what you just said. When you said wisdom is the faculty, that kind of clicked, and that I'm almost hearing that knowledge is perhaps the fruit of wisdom.
Yeah. Yeah, Margaret said, wisdom is the faculty and knowledge is the fruit. Absolutely. Knowledge and vision, which is a really useful pair. Oftentimes it's a kind of feature of the Pali language that words come in pairs. They're kind of like, it's a set phrase. And I like that visual aspect of it too, because there really is there's a distinction between the concept and the visualization of it. So a few questions have come in. Ooh, Bhante, what is your favorite sutta? That is an impossible question. It's like asking a writer, what's your favorite book? There are so many. I chose 3 favorites this week for our sutta study. One was The Many Kinds of Feeling. All were from the Majjhima Nikaya, which is my favorite Nikaya, I would have to say. One was The Grade of the Tamed. And then today we looked at the Devadaha Sutta. Those are 3 favorites, but not my favorite. I can't choose a favorite. Impossible. That is impossible. Tom Collingwood writes, I often struggle with idle chatter in the speech precept. I seem to justify a lot of my less valuable talk as making people happy with laughter or helping with lifting the mood of others. Any thoughts? Well, my first thought is that, okay, don't discount the need for social lubrication. You still need to joke with people. You still need to make small talk. What we were talking about before, and I think what the precept on idle speech is pointing at is intention. You know, if your intention with some small talk is to simply set someone at ease and lay the ground for working together or, you know, spending your morning together, yeah, that's a good intention, and small talk is justified. It's not idle. It's for a purpose. But there's another category of idle speech where the intention is, well, I mean, I think you're familiar with all the possible intentions that make speech truly idle. The intentions that underlie gossiping, for example, the wanting to show that you're the one who knows, or wanting to share your most recent brain spasm, that you're, you know, clever in some subtle way. That phrase, by the way, comes to me from another monk. This might be helpful, actually, the idea of the brain spasm. It was wonderful. A good friend of mine, a monk at the monastery where I did most of my training, Temple Forest Monastery in New Hampshire. And he just remarked after a visit home that I just realized people just have these brain spasms where words jump into their mind and they just say them no matter what they are. As soon as something comes into the mind, they just say it. They suffer from brain spasms. And I could relate to that. And I think that there is a way of being together with other people that can be quite mindless, where you're loose, and whatever pops into your head, you just let it out. if you're in that mode, pay attention to that and refrain from letting the words that just popped into your head out until you've actually decided, is that worth saying? That can be a great practice. It gives you time to check out the intention. Yeah. I mean, I guess this is boiling down to the cliche of like think before you speak, but I'm not really talking about thinking. It's more feeling at the intention level, the heart level. Like, why is this? Why do these words want to come out? It's worth experimenting with. It's worth risking the kind of doubts people might have that, oh, he's different today, or he's in an unusual mood or something. It's worth risking changing your own presentation a little bit to experiment with, to get to the root of right speech. And working on idle speech is a very important refinement of right speech. So yeah, I encourage you. Many nice words of appreciation from Thomas Gabriel, Secret Spy Records, Michael. Tom says, thank you. Maybe I'm a little harsh on myself. I will try being mindful of intention next time I feel like I fall afoul. Great. Okay, question from Antoinette.
Sometimes with meditation apps, like there's the different sounds that are playing, and so I was thinking in terms of samadhi, does that get in the way of samadhi, or is that like a stepping stone for someone to get to the point of meditation without the need for the sounds? Is it a crutch?
Well, I think you're going to be able to answer. Are you talking about your own experience, or just asking like in general?
Asking in general, and for me, sometimes when I'm doing work, like I need sounds, but I know that doing work is not the attainment of samadhi, but it does help to focus the mind for me when I have sounds playing. Okay,
so the question is about. The question had two parts, but both were about sound and the way that it affects the mind. First was in meditation apps. I've read quite a bit about meditation apps, but I've never used them. What I'm gathering from your question is that some of them actually will have like sounds or even maybe music, or just kind of like some kind of sound effects. And the question about meditation apps was, is that a good thing? Is that going to prevent or preclude the development of peaceful states? Is it a crutch? And then the question went on to ask about the role of music in daily life. Like how skillful is it to be helping myself to work by having some music in the background to keep my mind focused? Did that get the question pretty well? So with regard to meditation apps, and the word crutch was very important, I think, in terms of how to frame, as you frame the question and as I'll frame my answer. I think that meditation apps are great. I think it's amazing that millions of people are taking up practices of meditation by finding their way to them through these ubiquitous devices that have invaded our society. And I from my reading, I this is not a very informed judgment, but I get the sense that some of them are pretty good in terms of the actual content of the Dhamma. Of course, in the sort of Dhamma culture that has kind of been mushrooming in the secular world, there's plenty of Dhamma that has been kind of co-opted and commercialized in ways that are not entirely wholesome. But I do get the sense that some of these apps are really good. I don't know which are which, but the specific question about music maybe bears in the whole phenomena. By making the experience of sitting in meditation really comfortable, then really comfortable by like being soothing and pleasant, which is what we mean by comfortable. It does kind of place an upper limit on how far you can go with it. Meditation deepens as we learn to understand the role of feelings in our mental processes. Pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, neither pleasant or unpleasant, neutral feeling. Being able to see those feelings and their role in moving the mind from moment to moment is a very, very critical aspect of meditation beyond a certain point. And if you want to get to that point, then meditation can't always be comfortable and pleasing. In fact, it's really just getting your foot in the door. It can be valuable. I shared Ajahn Jayanto, my acharya at Temple Forest Monastery, his comment that, yeah, things can be a crutch, but sometimes you need a crutch. Like if you break your leg, you want to use crutches for a while. When your leg heals, you don't want to use crutches. You want to put the crutch down and start limping, even if it hurts for a while. And that's probably a fitting simile for the question of meditation apps. As for music while you're working, I don't know if I have a really strong view about that. I think it's important to think about samadhi as it relates to, and this is continuing the theme of make the translation. How does it relate to the idea of flow in modern psychology and in kind of work culture? I actually think it's a pretty good translation. When we use the word samadhi in the context of meditation, we're usually not talking about samadhi. We're talking about right samadhi, the samadhi that we're cultivating in meditation. And that's a very particular kind of samadhi. And this isn't just my kind of freewheeling interpretation. In the suttas, there's right and there's wrong samadhi, and they're both discussed. You can have, like, the classic example is an assassin, like a highly skilled assassin has great samadhi. They know their purpose, they stay on task, they do many different things, but they have one intention and they stick with it. But that's not right samadhi. Right samadhi is samadhi with awareness, with mindfulness, that's cultivating the highest states. The role of flow in work is really valuable, and I do think that obviously when you're doing right livelihood, if you're doing some kind of wholesome work, not if you're like I don't know about having background music if you're like trying to assassinate somebody. I don't think that's what we're talking about. In the course of doing any kind of ordinary but wholesome job, yeah, I would experiment with it. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with using music in that way. I do think that there's a level at which there's a kind of self-soothing that happens with music. I had a Dhamma teacher share the reflection with someone who was asking about, well, can I think it was actually a very similar question. Should I listen to music while I'm studying? Or no, it was about listening to music while meditating. That, well, music is really a lot like thought. It's a kind of thinking. You're like music works because you buy into its production of feeling. Like if you actually look at the way it's producing the feeling, it's not going to entertain you in that way. Anyway, I'm not really sure. I've never been one to listen to music in that way, so you're a serious practitioner. You can investigate yourself. Like, is this helping me? I'll leave it at that.
Well, I tend to not listen to music with words because then it's not helping me.
Right.
Then I start singing to it. But yeah.
Well, there's a few reflections for you. And we are running a little low on time. We have one more question that's come in. Jason asks, last question. One idea in cognitive therapy, which I believe has some Dhamma roots, is that our thoughts create how we feel. Well, that's interesting. Negative thoughts create negative feelings. Positive thoughts create positive feelings. Any thoughts on that? Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. You're pointing to a modern mode of psychotherapy. I will point to modern research in neuroscience. I mentioned this week the neuroscientist Antonio Damasio, who is an absolutely tremendous investigator of like the nature of mind and the mind-body question and the nature of feelings, I finally got my hands on some of his latest writings, and it just was like this incredible window into Vedana, into the topic of feelings and how they work, and how they how deeply intertwined they are with all of our mental function. We can have feelings about, obviously, things that happen, about experiences in the sensory world, but we also have feelings about thoughts, and we also have feelings about feelings. So having feelings, positive feelings from positive thoughts is something we can all observe just in the course of daydreaming. The opposite case is also worth considering, that thoughts, positive or negative, emerge from and actually in the lab, like if you study it, follow from feelings. In the body, an emotion will register. In the mind, it will register very shortly thereafter as a feeling. And then a short time after that, if it's a strong mood, like a sense of anger, a sense of fear, then angry or fearful thoughts will come in. And the neuroscientists have actually like put people in the brain scanner and watched as they reported their experience, that after being exposed to a frightening or an angering set of images, then in like between 2 and 10 seconds, they started having frightening or angry thoughts. And then those thoughts, of course, produce their own feelings. And this is how the current of mind flows. I came myself to the image some time ago of a stream, how feelings are like the stream, the water in the stream, and that they cut a channel. And that channel is kind of like our mood or our state. So a mind state is like the channel, and the feelings are like the stream. And if you've learned anything about how rivers flow, we know that they change course. So the channel steers the water, but the water also steers the channel over time. So maybe that image will help you as you reflect on the relationship of feelings and thoughts, and I would suggest mind states as well. But feelings, thoughts, and mind states, those are our curriculum. Very important aspects of our experience to investigate in your meditation and in your practice in general, in your life. And with that, we have come to the end of our time together this evening. We can end with 3 sadhus of appreciation for the Dhamma. I wish you all a wonderful week, or probably a good couple of weeks before I show my face again. But may you be well, and may you be fruitful in your practice. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.